Hi, I'm Matt Ingham and I do the press at Cherry Red Records, and I'm here with Ian McNay, who's the founder and chairman of Cherry Red. We're here for the first of the BPI Label Spotlight series, which looks at how record labels interact with fans and musicians. Thanks, Ian. Cherry Red is one of the most long-standing and prolific record labels in the world. What would you put down to Cherry Red's longevity?
Well, we started in 1978 and life was different then because you had things like this that came out, and nice coloured sleeves and records, and I remember the first ones we put out, the actual labels were printed in a separate place from the actual vinyl on the covers. So although the labels were on the records, when they arrived I had to put all the actual vinyl inside the covers. I remember Alan McGee having to do the same thing with Bobby Gillespie on the early Creation releases as well. So it's all changed a lot in that time, and I think one of our keys has been that we have been able to adapt to the changes, even been ahead of the changes, because in any business you've got to be aware there's always changes due, and if you get too far behind your business is going to suffer. So there's been so many stages really when you think about it. The first few years was obviously 7-inch vinyl. Then 12-inch vinyl came in on singles, so there was 12-inch as well. And then a few years later, CDs came in, and when it started, it was really hard to get capacity to press CDs. And then a few years ago, we had the whole world of downloads, and then we had the world of streaming, and who knows what happens next. But as you know, at Cherry Red, we're always looking ahead to make sure that if anything changes, we're up there with it, if not slightly before it.
So would you say that one of the biggest challenges of running a record label is keeping up with the ever-changing mediums that people use to listen to music?
Yeah, I use the mediums as an example, but of course the music changes. How people listen to music changes, so it takes in the whole cultural aspect as well. The whole culture of how people spend their leisure changes. And another thing at Cherry Red is we've been very, very kind of, not so much specific, but we've been very focused on what we feel is important to do in music release. So in the early days we were putting out new bands, and we were very proud to do that. We started out of the punk explosion of the late 70s. So most, not all, but most of our early releases were punk records or had a relationship with the punk or post-punk movement. And then that worked for many years, and then that became more difficult because with new bands, because so many of the bigger labels were competing at the independent label, and independent became indie, indie became a marketing genre, so indie didn't mean independent anymore, and we found that hard. So we had to then move on, look at the business, and at that point we started to get more into independent reissues, and so we got the rights to many of the independent labels that had gone dormant, reissued on CD their material in a very innovative way, and that did well for a time. and then we managed to get licensing arrangements with all the major companies. They were licensing their product. They didn't want to put out again on CD, so we were able to do that. So we've always had something up our sleeve, so to speak, to help move the company forward. And we have the book division, we have the DVD division. We're always looking at different things that we can do. But the important thing is that we all love music, and it's music that's driving the creative side. But you have to be creative also in how you present that music to people.
Can you tell us a little more about some of the outstanding characters in music that you've worked with over the years?
Well, to start with, I would say that everybody in their own way was a character. Some were easier to work with, as you know, than others. But I think anyone that's too balanced, my theory is, anyone that's too balanced as a character is probably not going to be a very creative musician. You need someone that is has a little bit of a crazy or unbalanced side to produce something that's special. The characters that stick out, Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys, East Bay Ray was in the same band. They're quite challenging characters at times, shall we say, but they produced something very, very special in their debut album. It was a tremendous album. I personally like Kevin Coyne a lot, and I remember watching the penultimate gig before he died, 3 weeks before he died. He was playing a small gig in Oxfordshire, and he had an oxygen cylinder by the microphone. And to that day, you know, he was pretending he was playing in a large stadium. There was maybe 100 people there, but for me that shows tremendous character. You mentioned Lawrence from Felt. We've been involved with him as Felt, Denham and Go-Kart Mozart, and he has his own ways of doing things. It can be infuriating, but that's when you have an independent label. That's what is as part of the package. You work with these people that do something very special creatively. They have their own way, and it doesn't fit into the normal structure. So Lawrence is one of our favourites. It's not easy, but we love the end result, and that's the important thing. Not only the end result musically, but also visually too, because that's very important to him. So there's been many characters over the years who I couldn't begin to name all the fantastic people we work with, and that's the great thing about being involved with a record label. You're very privileged. I feel very privileged. I'm sure you do, working with so many fantastic people.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Cherry Red's community engagement with AFC Wimbledon?
Well, the thing about Cherry Red is we've always had this kind of understanding that to work at Cherry Red, you've got to love football. And okay, it's less kind of enforced, if you like, than it used to be in the old days. But in the old days, what we used to do was, and Mike Allway, who again I mentioned before, the A&R guy at the time, he used to do this. If we were thinking of signing an act, then, because all the office, including the girls, used to go over to Hyde Park. We were then very near Hyde Park. On a Wednesday evening we played football. Didn't matter if it was raining, the sun was shining, winter, summer, we played football. It was a bit of fun, and we go to the pub afterwards. And what Mike used to do was, he used to invite prospective signings to the label to come and play football with us. And it wasn't to do with their football quality he was looking at, it was to do with their character. He wanted to see the determination of their character. Because at the end of the day, someone can be talented, as we all know, but they also have to have that desire and being able to fit into different situations, sometimes not always easy, to bring the best out of them. So we had many people that would just turn up. We didn't know who they were, and we found out afterwards, well, Mike was thinking of signing them. And some of their career was over because it's not that they didn't play football well, it's because their attitude wasn't right, playing football with the staff. And so we've always had this thing, we've loved football. Most of us, as you know, go and watch football. I've supported Wimbledon for, 40 years or something, since they were a non-league team. They, of course, got to the old Premier League, became a non-league team again because the club got moved somewhere up near Northampton, up the M1 some years ago, and we formed AFC Wimbledon. And it just seemed natural somehow for us to help out and sponsor the new stadium. It fitted in, you know. They're an independent club, Wimbledon, owned by the supporters. We're an independent label. It all fits together. And we also sponsor some leagues, the Cherry Red Records Combined Counties League, the Cherry Red Books Middlesex League, and we sponsor some non-league cups. So we just love giving something back to football because we love football as well as we love music here.
And what advice would you give to someone who wanted to start their own record label?
Well, I think the most important thing is you love music. I think the second thing is that you realise it's not going to be easy, and you've got to be very determined. You probably will get your breaks at some point, and when you get your breaks, you've got to handle it well. It's ironical because when we put out these singles all those years ago, 36, 37 years ago, we put these singles out. Actually, if a single was semi-decent, you sold 2,000 or 3,000 quite easily, and then you could reinvest and put out another single. Now it's a lot easier to get past the first stage with the internet. Anyone can make a little video, put it on YouTube and get it up as a streaming or a download or whatever. So it's quite easy the first couple of stages, but because that's easy, to get past that and to really start to break an act, it's harder than ever. You've just got to be determined, not give up. Probably the best thing is, if you don't have the funds available, to start as a hobby, which is kind of what I did in a way, because to start with, although I was doing it full time, I regarded it as something that wasn't bringing me an income. It was just hand and mouth the first 2 years. Until we signed the Dead Kennedys, I was living on virtually nothing. That's the way it had to be, and it is a test of your character. Can you find great acts? Can you work with sometimes challenging people? And are you going to make this the most important thing in your life? And if you're going to make it in the record business, if you're going to start a label, make it work, it's your number one priority, and you'll do anything to keep that going. And good luck, because it ain't easy.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.